Recording in progress. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Renee Garrett and I'm your Speech Therapy PD podcast host for Brainstorms, Functional Neurorehab for SLPs. Before we get started, we have a few items to alert you to. Each episode is 60 minutes and will be offered for zero point 0.1 ASHA CEU. If you're joining us for this live episode and your state license requires live CEUs, please be sure to complete all course modules before the end of the day on your Speech Therapy PD account, including the one that says complete course. Here are the financial and non-financial disclosures. Angelyn Franks is a former board member of ARCSHA and an active member of the Social Media Marketing Committee. She also is the owner of an LLC. Help me out, Angelyn. The SLP, oh my gosh, I had it pulled up on my phone. Pause.
Oh,
Everyone pause.
the name of my LLC, is that what you're saying?
Yes, the self
Uh,
SLP Self-Care Society. Is that right?
yes, it's technically it's Angelyn Franks SLP LLC.
There we go.
It's my yeah.
We covered it either way. It's good.
Either way.
And she also works on occasion for Essentra Health. My financial disclosures and non-financial disclosures are that I am the owner and founder of BrainBridge Connect LLC. I receive financial reimbursement from Speech Therapy PD for this and other webinars. I am also the secretary and president-elect of the Communication Disorders Foundation of Virginia. My brain and speech are not matching up. It must be because it's 8:02 p.m. So, questions tonight can be written in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll be answering them throughout the presentation if they're on topic, and if not, we'll wait until the end. So we welcome our guest, Dr. Angelyn Franks, SLPD, CCC-SLP, who's a burnout coach, mindfulness expert, and speech language pathologist dedicated to helping healthcare professionals, educators, and caregivers break free from burnout and design lives rooted in what truly matters. Drawing on years of experience in clinical practice, firsthand experience in the burnout cycle, she equips her clients with evidence-based tools to manage stress, set meaningful boundaries, and align their self-care with their core values. Her compassionate, research-backed approach blends science, simplicity, and her own transformative journey to guide others towards a fulfilling, burnout-free life. Her mission is to reimagine how helping professionals approach stress, self-care, and career fulfillment, providing a clear path to thriving both personally and professionally. When she's not coaching, speaking, or creating resources to support clients, Dr. Franks enjoys spending time in cozy coffee shops, listening to thought-provoking audiobooks and podcasts, and planning her next weekend getaway with her family. She's passionate about meaningful conversations, finding inspiration in everyday moments, and fostering a life filled with curiosity, compassion, and ease. Angelyn, thank you so much for doing this and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Of
So
course.
excited.
So I typically start with guests by asking them to kind of tell us about your journey, what led you to this field of speech language pathology, because I think that kind of unique story connects our audience a little bit better to the topic that you're sharing, but also kind of to you and the other things that you're doing in your career.
Yeah, I love that question. So what brought me to speech? I feel like I've heard a version of my own story in lots of other SLPs, but I got to school and I thought, or college, and I thought I wanted to be a teacher. Then I thought I wanted to be a nurse, and I didn't want to be any of those things. And somebody brought speech to my attention, and I thought, oh, what is that? Like, I didn't have speech in school. I don't even know if my friends had speech. Later, I realized, oh, that really fun lady that would come into the classroom sometimes, like, she must have been the speech pathologist. Um, so that I decided later in college, but I loved it as soon as I found it. And then my job journey is one that has been windy because it always intertwined with burnout. And so I thought for a really long time that if I just found the perfect setting, that it would be, I would feel better. I realized, and we can talk about this later, but it really doesn't have very much to do with the setting, and I wasn't really looking for the right things. But I did my CF and a sniff with adults, and then I really have done every setting. It's public school for 5 years. I've been a speech pathologist since 2010, so um, it's been a little bit. But yeah, public school and private preschool. I've done adult day health. I've done a little bit of teaching, adjunct teaching, and I've been all over. I love supervising. That's one of my favorite things. And currently I'm in a non-clinical role, and I've been mostly supporting burnt out SLPs through the membership in ways that I work with them and coaching. And so it's been a windy road, but I think that makes me well equipped to um, talk about lots of settings, because truly we're not looking for the right setting. We're looking for where we can feel aligned. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I think that's a great place to kind of segue into defining what burnout is, what it really looks like, because a lot of us, like you said, think we need to just change settings, or maybe we're just tired. You come out of graduate school and we're exhausted. Maybe you need a break, a vacation, but what does define what burnout really truly is? And then we'll kind of go
yeah,
off of that.
absolutely. So it's funny. I tell people all the time that a vacation won't fix your burnout, but because that's another strategy I tried for a while, was like counting down. And I've always been a counter downer. I love a
Okay.
paper chain, but so burnout is defined as chronic stress for a long period of time that does not um, that is not supported or mitigated, or so you live in a state of chronic stress for a long time. And so what I found, and what I found for myself and so many other people, like through the COVID pandemic, through lots of other stressful, dumpster fiery things in the world, um, we have all been experiencing chronic stress outside of work. And so many people, especially medical SLPs, experienced so much stress during COVID. I mean, I think everybody did, and change and stress, but I do think from what I've seen and the SLPs I've talked to, there's just a different level of just experiences that people working in those settings, those more acute settings, had. And so that added on to things, added on to stress for everybody. And burnout isn't like, oh, you don't go to work and put your burnout in a box when you go home. It's really stress. It's unmitigated stress all over. And so what the opposite side of that is um, when you have resources that you have to resource yourself, to support yourself, and to like reduce that stress. But it really is just a buildup of that chronic stress over a long period of time. And so I think a lot of us have that at in different ways. And I think people are starting to come down from some of the COVID stress, but I think that sat with a lot of us still does for a good period of time, and probably always will.
Oh yeah. No, I worked in acute care during COVID, so I 100% can tell you that my 28-minute commute went to 17 when everyone else was at home and I was going to the hospital. And I've said this so many times on the podcast, people are probably sick of it, but like going in initially and um seeing all my patients die, or even those who weren't my patients, and maybe they were, because we had a lot of volunteers who were geriatric at our hospital that came in as
Mm,
patients and didn't survive. But we also had got to the point where they just stopped calling code blues and code teams in general over the hospital PA system because we just, as staff, it was just too much. It was too hard. And I think going into COVID, I was probably already fairly burnt out because I was the only SLP with like a bare minimum PRN help. My person, like my job person who I job shared with, who was the outpatient split acute with me for so many years, and they finally moved to another location, and so she wasn't there anymore during that time, and we still, I mean, like I still relied on her for like, talking it out and doing all the things, but it was such it was just a really hard time. And they finally hired someone, but this was not someone with acute care experience who came in, and
Mm-hmm.
she did the best she could. And I'll be that kind and say that. But when I finally left, 2.5 years into COVID and went to start an outpatient program, I they hired like two full-time people to do. So it's like,
Oh, that does, and that just
yeah, it's
like
like, do
just a
you feel
little
good
jab.
about that? Like the amount of work that and stress that you were doing? Or do you feel like really like
I
what is
think I would
your
feel, I feel resentful for you about that. So
yeah. Yeah. It was like, oh, I want to toot my own horn and be positive and be like, oh wow, I did such a great job. They had to hire two people to replace me. But at the same time, it's like, come on, like we asked for help so many times. And anyway, it's water
yeah.
under the bridge now, but I think it speaks to what burnout looks like, how most of us are very driven to do an excellent job. We want to help people, we want to fix things. That's our whole role, our whole purpose is to support our patients and support our caregivers, but at
Hmm.
what cost? So, what does the research say about what burnout actually is? And again, and then the like second part would be, well, I'll say the second part. How about that? What does the research say about burnout?
Yes. So it said, so when I was doing my SLPD research, now my mouth is catching up with my brain slowly too. Um, I really, my view of burnout really came from looking at chronic stress and looking at the science of stress. And I mean, one thing that I learned that I was like completely misguided on my whole entire life is that like really stress isn't necessarily bad. It just is when you
Mhm.
like live outside of, like the goal of stress or when you are in stress is to like go back to homeostasis. And during COVID and all of those times, we were all living outside of it, and that builds up over time and impacts your immune system. It impacts, I mean, it impacts your ability to use your frontal lobe. You end up living in this amygdala hijack of survival mode, which makes your decision making less clear. So it has a lot of impacts, but the areas that cause burnout, this was another thing that I didn't really know. And when I always say I was like trying to solve the wrong problem, but I was never a math girly anyways. But when I was solving for setting, I was always looking at like one thing. So I would feel like I wasn't getting paid enough. So I would find a job where I would get paid more, feel more valued. I would look at, my caseload was too high or the population was not exactly what I wanted to do. And so there are all those different areas. But if you look at like what areas cause burnout, that breakdown is really helpful. So it's not just workload like that. And I think, I don't know if anybody feels this way, but that's what I was thinking of. I was thinking like my caseload is heavy, or I'm the only one in this setting, kind of what you were saying. But it breaks down to workload, community. So, like how, you know, whether you feel like you have another person in your department, or if you have, if the nurses and the doctors are kind of, if you're on their team or off their team, I think that can happen often. So I always have to like go back through them. So, um, caseload and community, um, like fairness. So if you feel like, I mean, the feeling of getting replaced by two people, like after that, I feel like that would hit me in the fairness spot of like, hold on a second. You knew that I was 200%. That's not really fair. And then oh my gosh. This is my brain blanking. So community, fairness, like salary, whatever the word is for that. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
like fair compensation, because that's a huge one too. I've had so many patients who had like in my area, because I'm Virginian, we're a big military presence here. I've had so many patients that were former military, retired military, who said, they have the same like entry level masters or a master's like during their military career, and
Hmm.
they get out and they do a job and they're like talking about their compensation, and it's insane. It's
Yeah,
insane, like how low our pay is. And
I
I
know.
had a really good guest on a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about budgeting, and she talked about how it's great that we can try to advocate for better pay, but like, how do you live within this means of what you're doing? So I
Hmm.
think that was a real positive for me to hear her say all these things, but at the same time, knowing that there are other professions who um, don't necessarily have to have a master's degree, particularly in the business world. They may
Hmm.
get one as they advance in their career, but entry level, they don't necessarily have to have one. And so when we look at our compensation, it's just wild to me, because I started practicing the same year as you. And so now that I'm 16 years in, I'm like, the last full-time job I got offered it's about $15,000 less than I made as a new grad. And I went,
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry, what?
Are you
I
in the
thought,
same area?
yeah,
Like in
I
the
was
same
like,
area of the country?
yeah, I wanted to
Wow.
be like, hey, I don't think I heard you correctly. I think you said that,
Did you
but
miss a zero or something? Like,
yes, or at least a five. Like, what?
right. 50 cents. Um, yeah, okay. Well, I'm glad that you shared that because I was able to like pull. I have too many tabs open is the problem, and I had my notes just in case, um but so everybody has them. The six areas are workload, control, reward, and so that's the pay one. Community,
It's also
fairness.
that piece of pizza, that one piece in healthcare. We get the one piece of pizza. Go ahead. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
oh no, you're fine. I was gonna say I have a piece of pizza right there that I was eating before. I was like, can you see that? No, that's so true. I know the pizza parties. And then values. And so after I learned this, I was like, okay, and this is like the research about burnout. And I was like, oh, I'm just looking at one. I was really looking at like workload and really reward, like pay. Um, but I like went through all of my jobs that I had left and pivoted out of. And I like went through and I tallied them up in a notebook and I was like, looked at all those six areas and I realized that like for all of them, I said that there was a mismatch between myself and my values. But as I was saying that, I was like, but what are my values? Like I don't know what my values are.
Yeah.
Um and I read a really good book by Dr. Pooja Lakshman called Real Self-Care. But she talks a lot about like finding your core values and not like the core values that we kind of absorb our values from our family, from our like our family of origin, our religion, our grad school programs. Like you walk into your CF with all of these values around you. And I mean in general, like through life. Um, but most of the time in SLPs, that shows up as like, oh, I've got to be perfect. I can't make any mistakes. Um, there's like a lot of externalized, like looking for external validation. And I think I remember my CF feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm so used to somebody reading every report, doing everything, and like what do I do? Like, I don't have somebody here to read these things or do these things. And so I was almost like addicted to the external like input when I got out into the world. And I had, I think we have to shed that. But oftentimes it just ends up looking in our brains like imposter syndrome because we think that those people that were reading our reports know everything, but they don't either. And so I did a lot of work on after I finished my SLPD and finished my research on trying to find what my core values were because I was just not sure. It was never something I thought about. Nobody really, I don't think it's like language that we're using, but you can feel a values misalignment even if you can't see it. Um, and I think a really good thing to talk about too is like when during COVID, during those, when you couldn't call it code blue anymore because it was like the trauma it was putting on staff. That doesn't mean that at some point somebody didn't look around and say, oh my gosh, there's a code blue. And like there are people, like there are reasons for those codes. And so like if you start to feel either that moral injury of just like this is hard, or like I feel like people have talked to me about, when they went home, if you were exposed to COVID and you went home to your family
Yep.
and you were worried about exposing them to what you were exposed to at the hospital, or having to be away from them to be safe, to keep them safe. I think there's a lot of ways that you might not label something as a values misalignment, but there's a lot of that shows up. And I think getting really clear on my core values was one of the things that helped me so much to understand kind of a broader pattern in what was causing my burnout.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue into like thinking about why so many people, like I said before, and you've mentioned it, we're a helping profession for the most part, and we want to do well. We want to be good at our job. We want to take care of people. And so how do all these well-meaning things just miss the mark of what we're looking for when it comes to the core values and like what our like core meaning is, really why we're doing what we're doing? Because I think a lot of it for me is, yeah, I want to fix it, I want to help you, I know I can help you, but at what cost?
Right. And I think the thing that we forget is that if you continue to pour from an empty cup, to throw a platitude in there, or not put your own oxygen mask on, you end up unable to show up. And like there are SLPs that I've worked with who have said that like the thing that made them realize that they had to change was some type of it's typically in the women that I've talked to, it's been they end up in the emergency room thinking they're having a heart attack,
It's
and everybody looks at them and says, nope, your heart is okay, everything is fine. But but there's some type of medical anxiety or exhaustion, chronic, that stress that leads to the physical manifestation. You're nodding. Have you experienced, like, is that something that you have either heard or had, you know? Yeah.
yeah, no, I definitely had that. I was having when I first went, I guess I'd been an outpatient once we switched managers, and that was when all the things started. Um, but I think I probably had a good modicum of PTSD that was undiagnosed because I had been in the acute care setting for 2.5 years, so basically the entire pandemic. And I went to outpatient, and we changed managers, and it became a nightmare to go to work every day. And I was having these issues of I would be in my office, and it was almost like, I don't know if it was a true vasovagal response because they really never figured it out, but it was like I was leaning forward, like towards the desk, and then all of a sudden it was like the room was coming at me, and I thought I was going to pass out. I've never passed out in my life, so I don't even know what that looks like or feels like, but I thought it was happening more frequently, and it wound up happening one night when I was asleep, and I woke up and I had that, like, I just got up, to go to the bathroom in the middle of
Hmm.
the night like most people do, and I got back in bed and I had that whole thing happen, but I was laying down and I was like, okay, this is clearly not something vasovagal because I'm not leaning forward, I'm not cutting off any things and stuff. And so I finally like had to wake my husband up, and like we had to go to the emergency room because I really thought something was wrong. I thought I was having some kind of, not a
Yeah.
stroke, but I thought something was happening.
Yeah.
And everything checked out. Like my heart was fine, my blood pressure was a little up. It was just a very weird experience. And so I think that's probably, it was very eye-opening to me because I was like, okay, girl,
Yeah.
you gotta get it together because I'm
Yes.
not getting any
Yeah.
younger. So
No, it really is. For me, mine looked like I was exhausted. And during the pandemic, we adopted our daughter. She was 10 at the time. Um, and I was in the middle of my SLPD and still working. And most of the clients that I had at that time were, I had a lot of non-speaking AAC clients. So like shifting that to telepractice, and there were some good, great, amazing parent coaching moments that I would not have had otherwise. But other than that, it was really difficult. It was difficult for them too. And, that feeling of we want our kids to have their services. Um, and I went to my doctor and they told me, they were like, do you feel okay? Like your iron and your ferritin are so low that like you shouldn't be like are like they were like surprised they were that low. And I was like, oh,
and my
that's why I'm
ferritin was
tired.
through the roof.
Really? Well,
Inflammation.
that's
Yeah.
oh yeah. Ferritin. So I think ferritin is for or what they told me was like it's like your iron stores. So like iron, my iron was low and my storage of iron. So I was at like nothing. I had to do 2 iron infusions, which were life changing, so much better. But I was just convinced that like this is just how I'm supposed to feel. And I think back to that moment, those moments, and I'm like, at no point was I like, maybe I should go ask my doctor. And I'm a person that like I, my daughter's 16 now, and like we talk all the time. Like, if you have a question for your doctor, like we're gonna message them, we're gonna ask. Like, I feel like I'm a question asker. I was like, at no point did I think maybe I should check in with someone that I'm tired and have incredibly terrible restless leg. And I mean, I think maybe I was, but not enough because then when they did check it, I was like, oh, okay. Well, I thought this was just regular tired. But there's, people have those moments and it's hard. Like we don't take care of ourselves. And that should probably be one of our top values so that we can continue to show up and continue to do the thing that we are trained in and are good at and are so you know, lucky to do, but you can't keep doing it if you are at if your battery is on red.
Yeah, no, and I think that's when we're talking about that, the should values versus the authentic, and looking what that distinction looks like for SLPs, because those misaligned values really kind of low key drive that burnout over time. And so, how did you mentioned kind of like looking at your values, but how did you look at them? How did you kind of determine, okay,
Yeah.
this is what's really important?
Well, I'll tell you, so often when I work with somebody or for my own journey, the list of values that you think you might have at first are probably should values, at least some of them. I said that on my original like list when I first started looking at it, I was like, balance is a value. Balance is a goal. I
Mhm.
am not saying it is not um it's not a goal, but it is not one of my values. It's not like one of the best ways to think about your values is once you get down a little bit closer to them, it's like, what do you lean into when things get really hard?
Mhm.
Um, and I do not lean into balance when things get hard. And if anybody does, that I have one friend who I always tell people like balance is probably not a value and it's a goal. I really try to help people look at, people will say family is a value, and I'm like, okay, family are a group of people, and you could be sitting, there are times where my family is sitting on that couch in there and we are all looking at our phones. Like, how do you want to be with your family is the value. And because one of my values is connection, like one of my top values. And so it's like that's when I feel fulfilled truly, when I am with my family and we're connecting and we're talking and we're sharing about our days or things like that. So one other way to kind of figure out what you value truly and not what you should value is looking at the things that you have this like built up resentment about. And so, like, if the things that trigger you, if you can spend the next week walking around being like, that thing triggered me, and like just note it down, like, and so often, and like, if you are in a place where you are like, start having these conversations with friends, like, so often I will call a friend and I'll be like, why did that trigger me? Like, why did that trigger me? And like being curious about why something triggers you
Mm-hmm.
is okay. I mean, I feel like a lot of people feel like it shouldn't trigger me, like, and then you're just in the shoulds again. And so looking at what triggers you and trying to figure out what is the reason can be really helpful. And for me, anytime there's like a disconnection, if whether that's like I'm not listening to what I need, or um I feel disconnected with my husband, or or I feel like we're all going in a million different directions. Typically, what makes me feel better in those situations is to lean into connection, and like, even if it's a really, really small thing. But I will feel super triggered if things feel disconnected. Um,
Yeah,
but
no, that makes
another,
sense.
yeah, but I think we don't, you know, something when I was working with a group recently, someone was like, I value excellence. And I was like, okay, tell me more about that. Like, I'll just get curious because, like, we don't mean to, like, these are things that are not our fault. Like, but she said, well, I feel really triggered when people aren't excellent. And like when people don't do their best. And we looked at it and got kind of down a little bit deeper. And it turned out what really triggered her was when people don't do what they say they're going to do. So integrity is usually that value. Like in integrity, yes.
Oh my God, okay, so this is perfect because
Yeah.
I would say one of my values would be self-reliance because I come from a background of a lot of like childhood trauma. But it's funny because today I said to my husband, there was a situation and not involving me, but a very dear, and near and dear, and someone that's also near and dear to you, shared friend. Um, I was saying that, um, it's not like integrity is like I feel like more in your personal relationships, and then when it comes to like professionalism, working with someone on say a talk, or just you have a business ownership, or you like a business
Mhm.
partnership, for example. And
Yeah.
so part of that is integrity, but the other part is the professionalism. Like you can be solid friends who go have a coffee or go have a glass of wine or whatever the thing is. But if you're working on something together and that person doesn't deliver on the things that they have shared ownership or stated that's their claim, that
Mhm.
professionalism piece to me lends into their integrity. And once you
Mhm.
break that, I don't want to work with people like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really, for me, that's a big value because I know that when I tell you I'm going to do something, I try my darndest to do it, and I try to do it in a timely manner. So I'll give you another example. So, like business wise, I feel like when I get an email from someone, and this is from like years of working in healthcare. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about not just my peers being immediate folks I'm working with every day, but like, say, an external physician or a nurse practitioner who's a good referral source, or another SLP who was relying on me to provide some information about an outpatient modified barium swallow study or something like that. So if they send me an email, my professional obligation is 24 hours during the business week to respond at like maximum to me. That's what I was taught. I also worked in customer service for a long time before I went into this field. So I think that probably colors my perspective. But I have worked with people and partnered on projects where I would send them an email. No, definitely not you. No,
I mean,
I would send them an email and they may or may not respond ever. Or you have to
mhm,
send them 4 to 5 follow-up emails. And it's just, I know everyone's different. Not everyone's a type A, even type
right.
B. But it's not that. It's the professional, this is my business, and I have to
Mhm,
have this professionalism surrounding my business. And so I think when if you have that as one of your values, I think you probably, I don't want to say you're more successful in your business, but I feel like you're more likely to garner this professional relationship and people maybe want to work with you because they know that what you say you're going to do, you're going to do. There's always those
mhm.
weird things that happen. Like when and not this last thing I was talking about with hospital, but I got hospitalized like for real, in 24 and I was really, really sick. I had to take a little step back. But I said that, like, I am really sick right now and I can't respond to you. And I think, you don't have to disclose anything further than that if that's what you want to share. That's what those little vacation
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
email
say.
things are
Those are
for.
the
That
best, like out of the office,
Yeah, the auto reply thing.
autoresponders. Yeah,
Yeah. Because
I
that leads to the ambiguity means to me, like, and I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's my own insecurities or what, but the ambiguity when someone doesn't respond is either they don't want to work with you or they don't care. That's the first two things I always go to. And then if I have to follow up and they respond and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I was on vacation, then I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Now I understand. But if you have that
mhm,
auto reply, then you
yes.
prepped your person who you may not have a close working relationship with, who may be exhibiting or experiencing burnout or something else that's going
Hmm.
on with them. Because, we humans are weird. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
older than most of our audience, I'm sure, but I jump to conclusions about the reasons that people don't respond. But that's usually my two is they don't care or they're just not invested.
right. Well, this is what I would say to that though, because I think this is like a good way to like view this because so integrity, if that I'm assuming like if I had to guess, and this is just from like what you just said, and then just like talking to a lot of people, I would guess that like compassion and integrity are probably two of your like values. Um, and so I think for me, what is so helpful when I have words for my values, because I also would kind of push back that if the trigger is integrity and like doing what you say you're going to do, like someone doing what they say and saying what they're going to do, but you're making an assumption about what everybody should do as far as like 24 hours, I think the best thing I can say is like the most compassionate thing there would be to clarify if they're not clarifying. So even if it's like, I think the very best thing to have is like in your email signature, if this is something that's important to you, like something in your email signature that's like, you know, try to get back to you within 24 hours, like during the weekdays, um, between these hours, like something about what you do,
Hmm.
so that like then you are operating in your integrity, like you are operating in it. But I think people see that and then they either say, okay, I'm gonna do that or I'm not gonna do that. But before somebody does it, because I'm gonna say I don't even know that rule. Like, I don't know if that's a helpful thing to say. Like, I don't like a 24-hour email rule. I hate email so much. So that's probably
Well,
my
mine
fault.
was customer service background, so that was our business rule was 24 hours.
Yeah.
It was a max. It wasn't a minimum. It was a
But I
max.
would now, even in this moment, I'm like, oh my gosh, how many people have thought that I didn't care? But it's not that I didn't care, it's that I don't know that rule. So I think this is just a good example of if the trigger is integrity, but it's like an unspoken thing, then I think finding a way, especially, I mean, not with everybody, but like if somebody is like close to you and you're like finding that they're not responding or they're finding that that's a trigger, I think clarifying that like in a
Mhm.
compassionate way can be so helpful because then it does go back. Because if you're like, again, solving for the right problem, if you're solving for integrity, but you're kind of calling it professionalism, then it's like that unspoken agreement is there. And it's not in, I mean, an unspoken agreement is not there actually, because they might not know. So I think, but if I know what is triggering me, if I know it's disconnection, or I know it's somebody, my other like top highest value is like, is mindfulness, like in a very operationalized way, like operate, like being present in the moment without judgment. And like, I used to think curiosity was like a separate value, but I think it lives in underneath mindfulness really for me. But when somebody is very if they're being judgy, I am easily triggered. And so, but again, I think these values like live in us, and then like finding ways to communicate them, or I mean, that's why I think talking about values has been very helpful for me, because I'm like, everybody in my life like gets to know my values, and I am like, Mom, what do you value? Like, and I don't know what my mom values, but we value very different things. And I've told this story a lot, but one of the other things that I really value is like spaciousness and not being rushed and not um so actually I think sometimes like something like the 24-hour email thing, I'm like, I don't even have space for that, because like that does not feel very spacious. But I think if you think about working relationships, like knowing that about you is so helpful for me, because I know that that's what you value now. And so I think it's just, I think these things are helpful, but my mom values like lots of having lots of things. So when I go home to Boston, she like plans all these things, or she used to. And then I told her this story, or she heard me talk about it on a podcast or something. And so now she's like, I'm going to ask you about doing 3 things when you come home. And then anything else we will like find space for if we want. But it's been the best thing, because like she gets to plan her 3 things. I get a little bit of spaciousness, and like we can meet in the middle, like with what we value. And it just makes the time so much more enjoyable for both of us. But I think that's a really good segue into the fact that we as SLPs also tend to martyr ourselves a little sometimes and say, like, I actually like should suffer. I don't want to hurt her feelings. I don't want, I don't want to be disrespectful, or and I think that shows up at work too. Like, I don't want to upset that person or say the wrong thing or ask for the day off. So I'm just gonna work and work and work and work and work and work. Um, but I think when you have words for your values, then it feels, when they're authentic and not those should based values, it feels so much easier to say what you need,
Mhm.
because you're solving for those things. And that has been a huge shift for me as someone who would have previously said I was a people pleaser.
Well, and I think one of the things with the 24-hour thing too goes back to like being adjunct faculty, because when it comes to students, and it doesn't matter if it's undergrad or graduate, they
Mhm.
expect an answer. And I remember being in that space, and I certainly had professors who were very on top of things, and like you get a response in like an hour. And then we had other
Mhm.
people who they might respond next week or mid-semester. And I've had my own experience with students who are like, thank you so much for grading our papers
Yeah.
in a timely manner, because we have a couple of professors who don't grade anything until the end of the semester. And so we don't even know if we're passing the course. And these are undergrads who are seniors. And so they're already stressed because they're like, I don't know if
Yes.
I'm going to graduate because I didn't get any feedback and I can't make improvements if I don't get feedback. And I've heard
Right. And
that
you're
story
doing your best and
so,
you have no idea.
yeah, and I've heard that so many times. And I think for me, that's another place where I think having that, and I usually will say to the students, 24 hours, but on the weekend it may be longer, unless I know you have a big assignment coming up. And then I'll check in on the weekend and try to make sure if
Mhm.
you have questions that I'm responding. Because I've been in that space and I was an older adult. This was my second career. So I remember like juggling all the things and stuff and not getting an answer to something that was a crucial assignment or like a pivotal part of an exam that was a pending exam or whatever, and not getting a response was so just stressful for me. So I
Mhm.
try to make sure I don't put someone in that place that I don't want to be in, that I didn't want to be
Right.
in when I was a student. So I think that's another layer for me and why I find that important, because I just oh, that lack of control and not being like, I
Yeah.
always termed it at work was like, I have to wait for you to do your job so I can do my job. For there was a lot of things that would come up like physician's orders or scheduling things, or I can't even think of all the things right now, but it was like waiting for someone else to do their job so that I could finish my job or do my job was so frustrating to me. And that's not, people would say that's perfectionism. I don't agree. I think it goes back to, again, I want to do a good job, but I can't always do a good job if you're not doing anything. I've got to be
Yeah.
relying on you to do the simplest thing, and I have to do the hard things.
Yes. Okay. And this isn't necessarily about you, but now I'm so curious, like what happens to Renee when you can't get something done, like in a timely manner? Like if something happens and you can't get something done, are you very hard on yourself?
No, I'm usually just pissed off.
Okay, well that's
Okay, so separate example, I'll give you a separate, not related example. So we had some construction work going on here, and there was a particular part of this that was supposed to be a 4-day project that turned into a 4-week project, and it's done,
always.
but it was done incorrectly. And so it's been the bane of my existence for the last month. And so my husband called me last week and said, "Is there anything about this that's positive?" And I said, "Yeah, it's done. That's it. I hate it, but it's done."
Hmm.
So, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're done.
Well, I'll share that like something that I experienced when I was like coming out of my burnout. I realized that I was, and I'm not saying this is you, but this was me. I was extremely, because I was in a place, and one of the symptoms of burnout that I didn't even talk about is like cynicism. So it's like really easy to feel frustrated by things, especially like maybe even things that you might have had a patience for last week. Like you don't have patience for them right now or in the, in these burnt out moments. But I was like I realized that I was very judgy of like a lot of things and of myself also. I was very critical and very harsh on myself. Like nothing felt good enough. I didn't feel like I could do enough. But I realized I was also like that for other people. And so somewhere in learning about mindfulness and stress and all of the things, I like got to the chapter on self-compassion and I was like, that sounds terrible. I'm not interested in that. It doesn't sound like it's going to work for me. Um, but one of the things after it took a while, it took a long time and a lot of loving kindness meditation and a lot of like really trying to be compassionate with myself. To one of the parts of self compassion is just like common humanity. And I think looking at someone else and being like, they're human, I'm human. But I had to get there for myself first. But I did not realize that those two things were related. So I guess I asked about you, like you being harsh on yourself, because like sometimes that can be part of that chronic stress. It's just easier to be angry at yourself if you can't get something done. Or you're like predicting how you would act toward yourself when other people don't do those things. And so, because I still think assigning a meaning to like somebody doesn't care or someone doesn't want to work with you, like there are 100 other things that it could be.
Yeah.
106, like a million. And I
Yeah.
know that like cognitively we know that, but it's so easy to just like go there when you're in
Yeah.
stress. Like, and I go there all the time. It actually is like my it's like very hard on my ego when someone doesn't like me. So if you're in the chat and you don't like me, don't even tell me. Like I hate when I feel like when people don't like me, I'm like, but like, why don't you like me? But maybe it's because I didn't respond to their email in a timely manner. Now I don't know. I'm kidding.
Stop. You
I know.
responded fine. No, and I think when it was 35-year-old me, I probably would have been more critical. But this particular project, this particular human, I've tried to give a lot of grace because I know that they have a spouse that's going through a medical challenge. And so I've tried to be very gracious, but like the things that you said you were going to do, and then you just either didn't do them or you just showed up and
They
didn't
were
say you were.
wrong.
So it was just, it's been a very disorganized, chaotic mess. And it has nothing to do with my profession, but because things were done so, that was part of the haphazardness, but the part that was the finished product was done incorrectly. I have more of an issue with that because you didn't even say, "Oh, I'm sorry, you just made excuses." And so now I spent a lot of money on this project, and so I'm
Mhm.
irritated. Doesn't
Oh,
have
it's
anything to
like
do with
it's
speech, but
I mean, I am of the mindset that like once you really dig down and get close, like if you get real close to your values, I think that the trick, I think they're there across, I think they're who you are. Like, I think people have their business, their values that go with their business, right? Like,
mhm.
if you have a mission statement and values and vision and things like that. And I think those can differ based on like what your business is and what you do and what the vision is. But for the most part, if somebody tells me like they have values at work and values at home, I'm like, I bet you $1 million I could whittle it down with you to find that like the root of it, like the middle of the onion is
That's
integrity or safety or something like that. And so I
yeah.
believe you that like I think if that is something that feels like a trigger at work, that's probably is this thing that's a trigger at home. And you have to look at that expensive project at your house. So it's frustrating. My husband's a contractor, so a burnt out contractor, ironically. So
Lesson. So we have a comment. When I was in the public schools, I had to respond in 24 hours to parents. So I grew up around that. Oh, and that's a good point too, because in medical, for swallow evals, we have 24 hours to respond. And we used
mm,
to, we had this one physician who was infamous for putting in an order at, say you got off at 3, he'd put in an order at 2:56 and be like mad that you didn't go do the swallow eval, but you're already like at the end of your documentation and your goal is to get out because technically it's 3. You could have clocked out at 2:53 and still been at 3 p.m. And
mhm.
so yeah, we dealt with that a lot. So yeah, that's another, I think, mindset of mine. Business wise, we had 24 hours to respond to a swallow eval, or you were no longer compliant with what the expectation was. And I think that might actually also be an accreditation standard when you're in, or at least it was at some point when you're in a stroke accredited hospital. Maybe even with trauma. I'm not 100% because I haven't been in that environment for a little bit. But I think
Yeah.
again, just looking at, the big career move, when you mentioned this a couple of times already, but like people who feel burnout are considering leaving their setting, and I can tell you, I left my setting. But I left my setting because think I had enough like self-awareness because I am an older person where I just got to the point where it was no longer worth it and was not serving me. And again, we have another mutual friend who really talked me through this and said, I think that you're feeling drawn to this new situation because this other thing is no longer serving your purpose and your goals and what you want to do. But for some people, it's leaving their setting or the profession is not necessarily the best choice. It feels like the gut choice. Like I got to go. I got to get out of the situation. It goes back to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs of safety, shelter, food.
Mhm.
But what do you wish people knew before they just jumped on that decision without necessarily thinking about their alignment or their core values? It's like
I
fight
think
or
that
flight.
yes, and literally in that case, it's like flight, right? For a lot of people. And then there's the opposite. There's the people that stay very, very miserable in jobs for entire careers. And I think now, and with, millennials, I think specifically, like we're kind of job movers, and I think there's good and bad stuff. But I do think that for me, and I will never tell anybody in like true burnout, chronic fight or flight, I don't think the first step is like thinking about your values unless that feels good. Like I think you have to regulate your nervous system, right? Like if you're really in fight or flight, like I mean, maybe make sure that you're checking on your iron, you're checking on your heart, you're checking on all those things. And like again, look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, are you feeding yourself? Are you watering yourself? Are you getting outside? Things like that. Um, and I think that, in those cases, those are important things. But then if you have the space, figure out what you value truly before you make that move, if you can. And again, sometimes I think there's a lot that comes with knowing yourself, like you were saying, and kind of knowing the reasons why you want to leave and just really thinking about it. But anytime that I just was very impulsive about moving, I wasn't moving to the right place. And it's not to say that there's a right or a wrong place, but I wasn't solving for all the problems. So I think looking at are you in alignment? And there's nothing that grinds my gears more. And my gears don't grind very much anymore. It takes a lot. But like I am a moderator in one of the like Facebook groups for alternative careers. And people will say, I'm in this setting. Should I go to this setting? And I'm like, you and I could work at the same school district at a different school, and one could be terrible because the principal is terrible, or and one could be great, or the doctors at one hospital could be great and the doctors at a different one. So I think when we're out there saying, what setting should I look at, you really have to go into these job interviews not from a place of scarcity, not from a place of just like needing to get out of where you are, and ask the questions that lead to knowing if it's an aligned specific placement for you. um, and I think that is what I wish that I knew a long time ago, because it's easy to pivot. And I think too, now it's not as easy, because I feel like that's the other thing. People are like, nope, there's no place, the job market is terrible. I'm like, okay, well, at least spend the time then thinking about what would be an aligned job. And maybe if you can move away from the cynicism, because nobody wants to hire someone who's like, I just got to get out of my job that I'm in.
Yeah,
Like,
no, it
that's
doesn't.
not who we want.
It's not a good look.
No. Yeah. So I think that looking at taking a step back and really looking at like what's going on and what you need can be really helpful. And I will caveat that with it's super hard when you're burned out. Like I don't say to anybody like, oh, this is like the easiest thing to do. It's very hard. And that's why just like having self-compassion, taking small steps, like realizing that you're human, and sometimes you might need to go home and go to bed immediately, and like that's okay. You can take care of yourself.
Yeah, and I think, when we're thinking about if you are in a space of burnout, when you're looking at the profession, because I think some people just silo that as the profession, but maybe you're more burnout holistically as a human being. But if you're looking at your goals in the job setting, as far as being a speech language pathologist, when someone feels like they really just lost touch about like why they got into this field, how do they get back to finding that purpose and kind of remembering their why? Because I talk about this a lot with
Mhm.
students. Um, and I say this like a lot in just different talks that I've done is, when you have a why and you can constantly remember what that why is, I think for me, that's been super helpful in my career because when you get rid of all that noise that's making you feel crazy and making you burn out because it's not aligning, again,
Mm-hmm.
aligning with
Yeah.
what your goals are, how do you get back to that if you're so like disjointed and just feel so off?
Well, I think that acknowledging that, a lot of the reasons why things don't feel great is that it's a dumpster fire. Like, is that we were in COVID, is that we are still feeling the impact of that, of COVID, and on healthcare and on reimbursement and schools. And there's so many things. And so I think acknowledging that, like, well, you may have had a bigger why at some point. I do think this is an opportunity to say, like, what small changes can I make to like what I can do right now or tomorrow or this week as far as like operating in alignment. And so if your core value is connection, um, typically, and this is an example for me, but if I'm feeling like I can't remember my why, I do go back to, okay, how can I just connect with the client in front of me or my coworkers today, or what it's really small, like the smallest increment of alignment can I build into my day? And then that gives you a tiny little bit of your battery back, like a little bit of charge. Um, and so I think, if your why was really big, um, and I think they're different for everybody, or they're vague. Like if you're like, I want to help people, like, okay, well, you can definitely help the person next to you. You can help the kid sitting across from you. You can help, you can help uh, build some alignment into your family life. There are different ways you can do it. And I think um, just go as small as you can. And remembering that like burnout makes you feel things like in the all or nothing, it gives you that all or nothing mindset. And so just because it's not like giant doesn't mean it's not valuable. So
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And what a great way to wrap everything up. I think it's been such a good conversation, and I really appreciate your insight and thinking about how, we're more than just speech language pathologists, right? It's about more
mhm.
than just that piece of us. It's the whole person. And we say this a lot with our patients, but I think a lot of times we forget that about ourselves. We're also a whole
Absolutely.
person. And so we have to
Yes.
get these things from other spaces and not just in a therapy room or in a hospital or a outpatient setting or whatever it is. We've got to get our needs met and our core values aligned so that we can be a helper person and a helping profession
Mhm.
because it does take a lot to do
Yeah.
that. And if we're not fulfilling ourselves, I think it's hard to um, you can, like you said, you can't give from an empty cup. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't keep giving, 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 and never get back anything into it. So I
Yeah.
just really appreciate
This,
your insight and your expertise, and I thank you so much for agreeing to be on with me and have a really honest chat.
thank you. Yeah. I think everyone should resource themselves. That's the way I like to say it because it feels less overwhelming than like even aligning things. Like just resource yourself to the best of your ability in the moment that you're in.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's just like drinking water.
Just as a reminder, if you've joined us for this live episode and your state license requires live CEUs, be sure you complete all course modules, including the one that says complete course, before the end of the day on your Speech Therapy PD account. Angelyn, thank you so much again for joining us, and I look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank